A five-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court will now decide on multiple pleas to allow same-sex marriage in India. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Our focus today is on what could be a seminal decision from the Supreme Court, despite the fact that the centre, the Modi government, has expressed its opposition to petitions that are seeking to legalize same-sex marriages in India. The Solicitor General appearing in the Supreme Court argued that this was not only about allowing the LGBTQ community the right to marriage, that it would have an impact on the Indian idea of a family unit, as well as other affiliated laws in issues like adoption, rape, crimes against women, dowry, even going so far as to say that same sex marriages could adversely impact the psychology of a child. However, the Supreme Court did not prima facie appear to be convinced. The Supreme Court has not only decided that a constitutional bench will take a final decision on the matter, it has asked for transparency, an opportunity for people to hear what arguments are made by whom. So, from the 18th of April, there will be live streaming of these special proceedings by a special constitutional bench set up by Chief Justice Chandrachud today. I think it's quite a progressive development in the Supreme Court. But let's get a sense from petitioners, among others, on this special broadcast today on how they see the court proceedings. Let me introduce our guests one by one. We're joined on the program by Niharika Karanjawala. Niharika, of course, has been appearing for several of the petitioners, and it's great to have her back with us. Also joining us back on the program, we had them first when they went to the Supreme Court, Udit Sood. He's one of the petitioners, as well as Saattvic. It's good to see both of you back again. Welcome back to the program. Joining us from London today is Raga and Nicola. Raga and Nicola were able to be married legally in the United Kingdom, but they would lose, as Raga explained to us before the program, their marital rights if Raga were to return to her home country, that is India. So more from the married couple who have their own experience as India fights this case in the Supreme Court. And finally, Rahul Easwar, who's an analyst and a philosopher, also a supporter of the Prime Minister, on whether he would have wanted the government to take a different position in court. Welcome, everybody. Niharika, let me start with you. It looked like it was going to be a kind of grim and negative day when the government was so sort of unequivocal in its opposition, but the Supreme Court seems to be leading the way in this argument. The Supreme Court is asking for transparency. There are now going to be live streaming of a constitutional bench. Are you hopeful? Do you have reason to hope that in a few months we could actually see same-sex marriages being legal in this country?
Becca, we're very hopeful, and it was with the same hope that we approached the Supreme Court for this interpretation of equality and of fundamental rights. And we were thrilled today that the Honorable Court was pleased to actually refer the matter to a constitutional bench. And especially that since constitutional bench proceedings are live streamed, it's wonderful to know that people all over the nation and all over the world, in fact, who are interested in this matter will be able to follow along with the proceedings. We're
Niharika,
very, very hopeful.
and I can see why you're optimistic, because the interventions by the Supreme Court certainly seem to be moving in the direction where the court believes that the time has come to have this conversation. But Niharika, before I open this up for the others on the legal question, the Solicitor General made the argument that it will create havoc. That's the exact phrase the government affidavit uses in the Supreme Court. Too many other laws will be impacted, whether it's dowry, sexual violence against women, adoption, and so on. As a lawyer and, of course, a rights activist in this case, how do you respond to that, Niharika?
Barkha, I can't bring myself to agree with the stand that the center has taken. I don't think this is an issue that will create havoc. I think Indians are very tolerant people. And I think that the legal framework that each of them have mentioned will, with a wider interpretation, a gender inclusive interpretation, find a way through. And let me say this, even if it would create havoc, creating havoc is not any grounds, and in the sense that it'll be an inconvenience for other laws will have to be changed and things like that. That is no ground to deny someone a basic fundamental right.
I mean, all change comes with a degree of havoc. There is no change that
Absolutely.
doesn't cause a churn. So I think that's the
Absolutely.
first thing to be said. Before I get Udit and Saattvic as petitioners, Rahul as a thinker on this issue, I want to bring in Raga and Nicola. They're old friends of mine. And I want to tell you a little story about Raga. Raga was in a heterosexual marriage earlier, and then decided that she wanted to be with Nicola, has two children from that marriage, and they're a kind of modern family, amicable family, all happy, united. The children actually have three parents, in a matter of speaking, Raga. And I want you to come in on the fact that love actually can't be defined by boundaries in the way that we understand them. Yet, you and Nicola, much after your relationship, chose to get married. Now, one of the things I want to ask you is, why was that legal stamp important to you?
Very important, because you know that I've like you said, I've been married before. So I was married to a man. So being married to a man, you take things for granted. So you walk out and nobody even asks you, are you married, not married? So it's like it's an assumption. You can buy assets, you can build your house, you can go get a mortgage. You, if anything were to happen to you, you can make take medical decisions on behalf of each other. And then with the last 15 years, when I was with Nicola, when I've been with Nicola, we felt that those were issues connected to us. So even though we were together 15 years, we didn't have those rights. So if something were to happen to any one of us, like it happened to Nicola, Nicola had a stroke, Barkha, as you know, 2 years ago. I couldn't make decisions on her behalf. We reached a point on worrying about what will happen to our assets in India, what will happen to our assets here. We There was absolutely no way Nicola could have got any access, or the children would have had access. That's one of the reasons we decided to marry. Apart from the fact that absolutely that love should be celebrated, people have spoken about us having children, bringing up children. We've had lots and lots of dramas attached to that as well, and we wanted the children to have a family unit again, as the world wanted, as society wanted. And just before I end my conversation here, the children actually got us married, and to us
Oh,
that's the
really?
most beautiful thing.
I
Yeah, so
think we have images of your marriage in the UK. If we can play those images, but Nicola, I want to bring you in. I mean, in effect, one of the reasons, that's such a lovely picture there, and really the heart fills with hope looking at that picture. But Nicola, in India and in other parts of the world, indeed, the argument made is that there is an idea of a family. A child has a father and a mother. In this case, the children do have biological father and mother, and they also have you as an additional parent. How do you respond to the critique made by many, including India's Solicitor General, that the psychology of children would be impacted if you legalize same-sex marriage?
Well, I've seen our children grow up. They're 25 years old now. They're just as functional or dysfunctional as any other child that age. They've done well. They've both gone through universities. They're both in heterosexual relationships. They both come home for their mother's kana. They're just kids. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think love is important. I think giving a child a safe roof over their head, food in their belly, put through school, educated. I think those are the important things. They're coming home to a loving home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
can I,
most
can
important.
Mhm.
sorry, one assumption people make that, oh, your son is so beautiful, is he gay? Is so gorgeous, is he gay? Oh, your daughter is so beautiful, is she a lesbian? I mean, it's a given now. People just assume that we're a family, we're a gay family, which means that all of us are in a gay relationship.
I'm smiling because the Chief Justice had to actually, I think it was the Chief Justice, Niharika, correct me if I'm wrong, actually had to explain in the Supreme Court today that the children of gay parents are not necessarily gay. There's so many assumptions, that yeah, it was the Chief Justice. Okay. Raga and Nicola, thank you for sharing that. Let's open this wider. Rahul, before I bring in Udit and Saattvic, I want to bring you in because you and I have sparred amiably over the years on many issues related to women, issues related to the entry of women to the Sabrimala temple. But I see you to be a basically sort of, liberal hearted person. It doesn't matter whether you're right wing, left wing. Do you believe the government should take a more progressive, open hearted position on this? Parliament should, in fact. But even when it comes to decriminalizing homosexuality, the courts led the way. You see, we have to acknowledge that the courts have led the way for change, and then the politicians have followed. Raul, you're on mute, by the way, so just unmute yourself before you respond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Barkhaji, two submissions. First of all, I'm a Gandhian pluralist. We in the right wing spectrum totally dislike the word liberal, so I would never concede that I'm a liberal. But
Take
yes,
any
a
word you
Gandhian.
want. I
Yeah,
will be.
yeah.
I'm happy with pluralistic. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
a Gandhian pluralistic. Two or three submissions. First of all the best for the community, because I believe Justice Chandrachud ji, who we all respect, even though we all know that he is a person of liberal proclivity, and we can all imagine the direction in which case is going on. That's very nice. 2019, we had a huge meeting of different religious communities, and homosexuality was one of the topic. I believe every community leader, including Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jain, Bauddha, Buddhists, were there. We all agreed that homophobia is bad. Homophobia is something we will never agree with, and that is something absolutely we should never endorse. Second, any kind of discrimination towards homosexual community is also something we will never encourage and we will never accept. But third, we have a respectful difference of point of view regarding the entire scientific paradigm regarding homosexuality, but that is up for an intellectual academic debate. But on a larger scale, I believe, see, government has to cater to different constituencies and needs. And let me be very honest with this, even different religions have different takes. Indian culture has been more accepting of sexual diversity, whereas even in Semitic religions there are some references of Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed by God for
Yeah.
some kind of diversity kind of an act. So that there are slightly nuances and differences. Even Pope Francis, who we all respect for his great positions, said, "Who am I to judge?" And that was a rightful position, but he also never went to the extent of saying that Catholic Church will bless the homosexual couples. So it's a debatable area. I believe more and more consensus is needed, engagement is needed, more and more conversation is needed, like mainstream channels like yours, and
So
more media
listen,
needs to
Rahul,
talk so that we can bring to a common ground.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but are you saying that you do not want or you would not support a diktat from the court? You want this to come, as it were, from within a social consensus. The problem with that is no change has ever come from within a social consensus. Not the decriminalizing of homosexuality, not even equal pay for equal work when it comes to men and women. No dramatic change, truthfully, has come from organic, at its own pace, societal change.
My only submission would be an organic social inner reform would have been much better. But having said that, we all know that some kind of outside push of legal instrument is always needed. I think we are well poised. All the best, and I'm happy and respect for the community. They are going in the right direction. There are every possibility and probability of a victory in their cause and case. So all the best for you. But there are some sections of people who would need more discussions on this before accepting. There are many people who would accept it on the face, but deep inside they will have their own inhibitions. They may for outside for the fear of Barkha Dutt and liberals say that they will say the politically correct thing, but a much more deeper inside acceptance, I believe more and more engagement is needed.
I mean, if fear of Barkha leads to these changes, I want many people to be scared of me. But look, you raise a serious question. Attitudinal changes can only come partially from a diktat, right? I think Udit and Saattvic have shared with us that despite the decriminalization of homosexuality in India, organic change is still catching up. There are still issues with getting a home, with landlords having sort of comments, slurs at work, assumptions about your private life. So much change, there's a gap between what the court says and how society responds. So I think, Rahul, you raise an important point there. I have a more complex question that I want to put to Udit, Saattvic, and as also to the others. So let me start with you, Udit. Why does the LGBTQ community want to embrace institutions that even the heterosexual community has begun to question? Marriage, when it started, was about sort of joint ownership of assets. It was about property rights, right? It was about many practical reasons. I mean, I know mass media has taught us otherwise, but honestly, if you look at the academic origins of marriage was in fact about property, about managing property together. Some might ask, why does the LGBTQ community want to embrace an institution that is today being questioned even by heterosexuals? Why do you want to ape sort of cultures or institutions that are affiliated with the heterosexual community? What would you say to that? First, Udit and Saatvik. Go ahead.
Thanks, Barkha. I would only respond that that's perhaps not the most accurate and fair framing of what's happening here. What we are doing is knocking on the doors of an institution which is very important and ingrained in society and saying, don't leave us out. We are only asking for the choice, the freedom, the liberty to marry, should individuals want to make that choice. And that choice comes with a lot of obligations and rights and responsibilities. And we are aware of those. We want those benefits. You've heard from others on your other guests on the show what they lost when they didn't have those protections. And so to
Mhm.
not be able to exercise that choice is a significant infringement of people's freedoms and rights and fundamental rights.
No,
And, we
to be clear, this is not my framing. I'm just putting in
correct.
front of you questions. I was one of the first sort of signatories on the earliest petition to decriminalize homosexuality. My position is consenting adults should be able to express love legally in the way that they choose. But I am merely putting in front of you reasons that will be put in court when this hearing takes
For
place.
sure, for sure. And I
The
appreciate
idea,
that.
yeah. And so,
I
how
don't
would you
I
respond to
don't
that? Yeah,
and that's why I feel like, so let me clarify, I don't mean to change your framing, right? I
yeah,
would encourage others to view it from this perspective, that we're not saying that everybody must get married. We are only saying don't leave us out, don't leave us behind, because that puts us at a significant disadvantage to those who want to exercise this choice. And also it sends a clear message, it sends a clear message to the kids who are growing up queer, that look, if that's who you are, then you're not going to get to make these life choices, get to experience aspects of being a human being that is open to everybody else who's a heterosexual. That's the
yeah.
message that I think is really problematic and needs to be addressed.
And I agree with you, but let me put to Saattvic some of the questions raised by the Solicitor General in court, and I'd like Niharika also to add on thereafter, that it would impact, quote unquote, again, this is not my framing, I have to clarify this again and again, the psychology of a child, that there is an idea of a family, the idea of a family has a father, a mother, and it has the children and a dog and a picket fence. I mean, I added those last 2 points, but he made the point about the psychology of a child. And this is a serious question, because in our country, while single mothers today can, for example, adopt, single fathers can't in the same way, and that's been done to actually protect more than anything else the girl child. I see the reasons why these laws exist. So Saattvic, my question is, once you legalize same-sex marriage, many affiliated laws on parenting, on children, on adoption, on surrogacy would have to change. How do you respond to that? Because that's the key argument I have a feeling that's going to be made in court.
Well, I think that, Niharika put it very well, is the prospect of future legislative change is no grounds on which to deny people fundamental rights. When the British left India, a lot of things had to change. But that didn't mean that, you continued to keep Indians and dogs out of public spaces. And, I mean, on a slightly sort of less frivolous note, we forget that this same change has happened in many, many countries,
Yes.
and the walls haven't caved in, the earth hasn't sort of shattered, and
Yeah.
people continue to live their lives. So this argument that many things will have to change, it's a good thing that many things will have to change, and honestly, I look forward to those processes. But this is a large, LGBTQ rights and equal rights in general for marginalized communities, very complex issues involving the law, involving the media, involving societal acceptance, and this is just one cog in that large process that needs to happen. So personally, I think I'm very happy that it's happening. I don't agree with the proposition that a large scale, a wholesale, the prospect of wholesale change is in any way a legal reason, to not undertake this process.
Niharika, for a long time, the attitude to the LGBTQ community has been don't ask, don't tell. Even in the United States of America, for example, when it came to having sort of people from the community in the military, that was the attitude. It's now changed. It's been called out. It's taken years for it to change. India, by that standard, once the change has come, it's actually galloping. That's the good thing. But on the complicated side, we have still not resolved, for example, adoption in single men. I'm just putting it out there, right? We've not resolved this issue. Tomorrow, you have, let's say, Udit or Saattvic married to their respective partners. They're living in India. They want to have kids. We do need accompanying changes. Otherwise, what is going to happen is you're going to have something change, but nothing change at all.
I agree with you, Barkha, and thank you so much for allowing me to address on this particular issue of the psychology of children, because this was a point that really struck me today when it was mentioned in court. And I thought not only was it a hurtful argument, and it brought forward it brought forward an emotional reaction from everyone on the petitioner side, but I also thought that it was a very inaccurate argument, a slightly flawed argument, because if what you're saying is that in order to raise children accurately, what you need is a mother and a father in the home, then frankly, you are discounting thousands upon thousands of families who aren't made up of that kind of dynamic. Families are of all sorts. And frankly, now, supposing there is a single parent household, what is the proposal there? Are the children to be removed from that household? It's absurd. So frankly, even floating the idea that a same-sex couple will not be able to raise children with the same love, respect, and values that a heterosexual couple will is to my mind, a slightly absurd argument and does reflect the still greatly biased view that people take to same sex couples. A notion of you are lesser than, and as a result, you will not add up. And I think that is something, I think arguments like that are something that really, really need to be addressed. And I also want to say that there was one thing Rahul said that I really agreed with, that some people will require a lot more discussion on these topics. I agree with that wholeheartedly, because for a great segment of this country, uh, people don't know any homosexual couples of their own. The only notions they get about homosexuality are from the media, from movies, flawed notions. And frankly, once people see role models in every sphere of life, once people see role models in their friends and examples in their friends, in their families, once people feel that it is safe to come out of the closet and be who they truly are, that is when a true societal change will actually take place. The court needs to lead the way for us, because that is only when society will actually move forward for this change. And in fact, even post Navte Johar, this was something the court said ought to take place. There ought to be proper integration so that there can be acceptance throughout society. And I think that
Well,
is a very important thing.
what is going to be very interesting to watch is this is also a time when the center and the court are are having an argument about who has what power. So if the Supreme Court were to give a judgment, will Parliament accept it? Will Parliament move to revoke it? There's so many questions, but it's an exciting time, because when countries stand on the poise of change, good change, I think we should all applaud. Rahul, you have reservations. Your reservations are what?
Barkhaji, two submissions. Let me be very honest. I have a very close friend who belongs to the gay community. He's one of the most celebrated fashion choreographers of Kerala. So when I brought him on a positive note to my home, some of my relatives had some inhibitions. So that will automatically rub on us. So I was trying to reason with them that it is his personal choice. He's one of the most well-behaved, family-oriented guys that I have known. But that's the reason why there needs to be more engagement. Second, with due respect and to the court process, I believe government is not too adamant on disallowing gay marriages. They are also having a thought that let the courts lead the way. Let us not take the onus and let us not offend
Yeah.
the vast majority of so-called right conservatives. Government is taking a very lukewarm position in the way that let it be the call of Supreme Court. That is the government's feeling that we get from our
Yeah.
sources. And
Yeah.
I believe, see, I'm a right conservative activist, but I would request, appeal to the community to engage more and more, sensitize us more, educate us more, if I can use that word in a proper sense, because only after having this particular friend of mine, I understood many nuances. Otherwise, what the earlier advocate rightfully said, we only get the ideas from the movies, which are deeply flawed. We get from, some kind of bad literature that is again flawed. So more and more engagements and discussions are the way ahead. Legal acceptance is okay, but social acceptance should also be there. So, the community should strive for legal acceptance, which can be a start, and more social acceptance, which can be the way forward.
Let me put that to Raga and Nicola. Raga, you've seen it from both sides. You've lived in India as a gay person. You've lived in London as a gay person. What's different? Hang on, you're on mute.
Well,
Raga, you're on
first,
mute. Yeah, go
there
ahead.
are quite a lot of differences. First of all, like I said this morning as well, that as soon as I get off a plane and walk across the borders into India, first of all, I become single, and that should be very exciting for a woman of my age. But it bothers me because the first question at immigration is that, oh, are you here with your husband? So the microaggression. So we have to deal with that. I am so afraid, Barkha, I cannot tell you to even answer that and think that I hope Nicola is not standing behind me. And then, I have to say, oh, that's my wife or that's my partner, because I don't know what will be the reaction to that, the response to that. So there is that first fear. While there is a circle of influence, we have our own little network in India. So whilst we're amongst our friends, we're absolutely fine. The moment we get out of that comfort, it's completely different, because then we start behaving like business partners, or some people actually call us sisters. You're so good at sisters. I mean, I tell them which part of us like really look like sisters, but hey, whatever helps. And
Yeah.
that Barkha, to be honest, also happens in England when we are at social events. Sometimes people come up to us, Indians come up to us who are more comfortable with being in denial. So they'll say to us, oh, you got such a lovely sister. And I look around thinking, who is she pointing out to? And they're pointing out to Nicola. And I
Yeah.
said, well, what do you say? So there are quite a lot of differences. People do ask us about our children quite a bit. And as soon as we tell them that we have children, you can see the mask drop, and they just think, oh my God, this is a
How did the children first react when you came out of the closet? You basically told them, see, a divorce is never easy for kids, right? Let's also not gloss over things. A divorce is not easy for kids. This has nothing to do with heterosexuality or homosexuality. You were basically telling your children that their idea of a family was not as they imagined. It was going to be more elastic. It was going to be different. How did they first react, Raga, when you told them that you were gay, that you were now with Nicola, that you were not going to be with their father in a romantic or sexual way? How did they react?
Okay, so first thing is, I like one of the other persons said here that we all have a notion of a family. So when children draw, my children, when they would draw, when they were very little, they would draw a mom and a dad, and them twins and a dog or a cat, whatever. So that was the notion of a family in their head. Now later, 10 years later, they were only 4.5 years when my then husband and I separated. It was difficult for them, as that mom and dad were not together. We had to work through that with them. It had nothing to do with my being gay or being homosexual, which anyway, the question I ask all heterosexuals, my being homosexual, how does that bother you? How does it change your life? Do you not eat at home? When you go home, do you feel like, I can't eat today because Raga is homosexual? Anyway, so for the children, when they were to repeat this, when to repeat a visual diagram 10 years later, it was mom, them, and a cat. So children actually don't really understand this. I never ever had to come out, Barkha.
Yeah.
This whole thing that you have to sit and tell your family, you know what, this is your dad, this is me, we are straight. Similarly, you don't have to sit there and say, this is your mom now, and this is me, I'm your mom. We are in a gay relationship. Children don't understand that. Children only understand the language of love. And we, in all these arguments, we forget that. I know of how many families, heterosexual couples who are in really terrible, dysfunctional relationships. They're bringing up children in a very
Yeah,
violent
I
domestic.
agree. No, I agree. I mean, I need
And
no convincing, but I
it's
think the
really
point
sad.
Rahul, yeah, but I think the Rahul made an interesting point about engagement, and I'm wondering how. Sorry, Nicola, I'll come back to you. I just want to bring in Saattvic and Udit as well. Udit, how do you feel about this point about engagement? Because one view could be why we don't have to explain ourselves. We're not this sort of species that has to be understood. We don't have to account for ourselves. But on the other hand, I know from many friends in the community that one of the things that really bothers them is acceptance at home. Right, acceptance at home, the acceptance of parents is critical, and it causes great anxiety to not have that. So maybe intellectually we want to say, why does anyone have to explain themselves to anyone? But emotionally it isn't that easy. So I just want to get a sense from both of you how that journey has been for both of you. Udit, go ahead.
Thanks, Barka. I think ultimately the goal is the societal change. It is the acceptance, is where everyone feels safe and they can come out and no one has to lead a life of dishonesty where they marry someone of the opposite sex and then commit to them and lie to them for forever. Like that is really the end goal. And it's a chicken and egg problem, because as Niharika rightly said, if you don't create an environment where people can come out, what you're doing is limiting the number of advocates you have out in society spreading these messages. Because the minute one person comes out, people in their immediate influence are going to start evolving their thinking. I went to college, for example, with a large number of very conservative people, and my closest friends are a group of 18 very alpha hetero broy bros. And all of these people had very, very different perspectives about homosexuality. I was the first individual to come out
Yeah.
to them. And overnight, I had 18 people sort of standing behind me, arguing with other people, pushing back against homophobic slurs by other people. And I was like watching this and thinking, what the hell happened? I happened. Because
Yeah.
people have love in their heart. They just need to know someone who can do it. And if you don't have an environment where people feel safe to come out, you're not going to have these additional advocates. And so, I think it's right where the court has to take the first step and say, look, this is who we are, this is who we aspire to be. And that creates a little bit more room for people on the ground to be like, look, the court has said, queer people are equal. And so I'm going to assert that right. And then that person will have to face some hardships, but, eventually will overcome those. And that's how I think over the long run, change will happen.
Satvik, if you want to add to that, I mean, I think there's a point there that, suddenly even those who you think are sort of alpha males, completely heteronormative, will come out and become these advocates for equality, if not for love. But it's not been that easy for many of my friends. They're still struggling with parents. Parents will accept partners, but will say, do you have to label it? Do you have to name it? It's like Raga and Nicola. Can't you just say you're best friends, for instance?
In my case, my partner's parents are not on board. They think that I am the worst thing that's ever happened to their son, or at least they did, a year or two ago. Look, I
And how
think
does
that
that play out for your partner? I'm sure it causes a great deal of anxiety.
it does. It causes a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of stress. It's one of the reasons we aren't married yet,
Yeah.
because we want them to be there when we do get married. Look, let me just sort of coming back to this original point about engagement.
Mhm.
Barkha, there was a time when there was a time when I was an actor, and back in 2017, you remember Karan Johar had just come out with his autobiography and very famously not said that he was gay. And I wasn't like a big actor or anything. I'd been in like one TV show and
Hmm.
one movie or whatever. And I had written a very impassioned blog post, essentially making the point that Rahul was making earlier, is that there is documented academic research that shows that you are more likely to be a supporter of LGBTQ rights if you know LGBTQ people. It's that straightforward. And in my mind, it's an obligation. I don't think it's a question of, I should, it's an obligation to come out, to engage with the wider community, because there are very few of us who have the privilege to do so. And I am one of them. I'm one of the people whose parents were completely okay with him growing up. I didn't have to receive any pushbacks from my extended family.
Yeah, and
For
I have
me,
to
it's an
thank you.
obligation.
Sorry, I'm jumping in only to say that thank you for making that point about privilege, because we also need to underline the aspect of class. There is an aspect of class, notwithstanding certain reservations from families and support structures. Think now of somebody who doesn't have lawyers, who doesn't have a support structure, who doesn't have the money to even sort of put forth this argument, who's just a caricature or a stereotype in their village, for example.
Exactly, exactly. And it is our obligation as people who do have the wherewithal to make these changes, to have these conversations, to have them. Because I've seen with my partner what happens when you grow up in an environment that isn't conducive. And
Yeah.
let me tell you, and I've had friends who've taken their own lives. I've seen people that have committed suicide because of what society has thrown at them.
I mean, this has
So
actually happened to somebody you know well.
yeah, well, yes, absolutely, it has. And so, Barkha, when it's mildly infuriating when people sort of throw academic, sort of philosophical. Why should
Yeah.
I have to explain? No, I'm sorry. We live in a real world, and you can sort of leave utopia where it's at. It's an obligation for you to come out if you can, because it's not for you. It's for other people. And
Yeah.
what are we, if as humans, how are we different from animals if we don't care for other? I mean, even animals care for others of their own
Yeah.
race.
Nicola,
So
can I bring? Yeah, yeah, I hear you, and that those with privilege, in particular, that obligation is there. But of course, I don't want to judge those who don't come out. We don't know what they're grappling with. We don't know what they're dealing with, right? Nicola, before I give Niharika the last word on this, just also to make the point that this resistance to change is not an Indian phenomena. While there are many countries who have moved towards change, change has been slow in many other parts of the world as well. And even with the change, social resistance, I mean, we're seeing in the United Kingdom the whole sort of fight right now over free speech, over the boats coming in with poor refugees. So, these are debates at different in different ways that are happening all over the world about inclusion and diversity. But just a comment from you, what it means for you, not an Indian, married to somebody who's from India, where same-sex marriage doesn't exist. I mean, you're not the wife when you cross the border.
Yeah. So I was born in New Zealand, raised in New Zealand, and in the 80s, mid 80s, we overturned the same colonial law as 377, and then did the full turn around in 2013. And the way I'm making reference to that is same-sex marriage, is that I saw my own country change over time. And it doesn't mean that there's not people down there who are homophobic. It doesn't mean that there's not people there who don't believe that homosexuality is a thing or think it's a sin. And I think that is okay. You can think it is a sin. You've got the right to feel that. You've got the right to have different politics. You don't have to believe in me, but we should still, but that doesn't mean that they haven't got the right to marry or I haven't got the same rights. So it's about equal rights. It's about equal rights to not agree with each other, but still have equal rights for us. So that's how I see it. We did an intervention with the petition that's coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that, and I believe that India will get there in the end. I've lived in India, and I've seen the change happening in India, and I believe it will happen there as well.
Raga, were you wanting to add something there?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just going back to the word privilege, because I wrote that down as soon as we were talking about it. You talked about marriage and you said, why should we have the old patriarchal structure, which the heterosexuals are questioning itself. And I think to myself that this, and I said this to you last time as well, we can sit here, very privileged people, and actually talk about marriage in that manner. There are people who actually don't have another language even for the word gay. I ask my people in Mangalore, where I come from, if I want to come out to my family there, what will I say to them? I don't even know what I'll say to them, because they don't understand when I say I am a lesbian or I'm gay. What does that even mean to them? Typically, they say, oh, when I feel gay, I'm happy as well. But we don't even have a language for that. So this question of marriage, not being married, let's just give us a choice. Then let's get to that privileged state where we can make that decision, whether we want to be married or not.
I think that's an important point, that actually if you pare it down to its sort of bare basics, it's just about having the same rights. After that, whether you choose to exercise them or you don't is up to the individual or up to the couples. Niharika, I just want to give you a last word. Legally, do you see this being a long, drawn-out cold storage process, or do you think the court is quite keen to get on with it and reach a resolution?
Barkha, we're very hopeful that this is not going to be a cold storage process. The Honorable Court has already set a date for April 18th for arguments to commence and to continue. So we're very hopeful that this is something that will not take forever going forward, and will be something that will be decided. I wouldn't say expeditiously, but let's say in appropriate time, after hearing arguments from all sides, decided in appropriate time and decided soon.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you for fighting the good fight. I think there are certain conversations or certain issues that we report as journalists on which there is no other side. Sure, there can be nuanced questions about how other laws have to keep pace, how other laws have to change, whether they be inheritance, adoption, crimes against women, dowry, domestic violence. There are going to be issues to tackle. There's no question about that. But as we said at the beginning of the program, what change comes without disrupting and shaking up the system? Shaking up the system is good for health, both of a nation and of us as individuals. Thank you, Niharika, Saattvic, Udit, and Raga and Nicola. Take care. And thank you earlier to Rahul, Easwar, who had to leave a bit early, for participating in this conversation. To our audience, this is a seminal moment. Make no mistake. I think we stand poised for big change. I'm quite hopeful that it's coming. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.